Okay, this is Slocum Creek Campground in Oregon. Just taking off from the south end of the campground and just heading south away from the campground itself. There's just some really awesome peaks and chimneys and all kinds of interesting landscapes out here. Beautiful day too. Nice and sunny, a few clouds in the sky. And switching into manual mode right about here, just to kind of get away from the campground, keep the drone as quiet as possible. Now I'm just going to cruise around these peaks, do a little diving here and there. Looking really good. This was my first flight after arriving at the campground. My first flight, I usually try to get a feel for the area, and then on my second flight I'll get a little lower and maybe do a little more diving, a little more aerobatics. But yeah, just trying to get a little feel for this area here. Really beautiful, incredible landscapes here. And this is the goggles video, of course, since I did lose the drone. So it's a little lower resolution, 740p I think. Flying right back toward the campground here, top center. Here's a nice view of the campground down below there on the right, and there in the center, that's the parking area for the boat launch. That's Lake Oahe down there on the left, and a lot of rafters launch their rafts way upriver somewhere, and they coast down the river and down the lake, and they take their rafts out here, pick them up here. This is the hill just north of the campground, and this is where I lost the drone, coming up in about a minute. The elevation here is about 250 feet above the campground. I'm flying about 80 feet above the hill at this point. It's another nice view of the campground there in the middle. These chimneys are just a lot of fun to fly around. And we're coming up to where I lost connection, right up in the top of this hill, coming up in about 30 seconds. A little roll there, just kind of having fun, getting a feel for the area still. Now you can see the campground right out there on the left, and that's where I'm at. And that hill right below the campground to the right there, that's what causes the disconnect. And it's coming up right about now, a roll followed by a loop, bam! That's right where it happens. And this is showing the same scene in slow motion. It's about 1/10 speed. Now right after the roll I went into a forward loop, which I shouldn't have done. I didn't realize I was going to disconnect. But it disconnected right as the drone became inverted, and then it tried to stabilize itself and return to home, and that's when it just failed. If it hadn't disconnected, it would have been fine. This is the last 13 seconds from the flight data recorder. Notice the forward speed at the moment of disconnect is around 22 miles an hour, and the descent speed is around 31. So it was about 80 foot in the air, and it was dropping like a rock. The RTH kicked in, but it never made it back. This is drone video with the Avata. The following morning I'm looking for the drone, and I'm standing right where the GPS coordinates said it disconnected. But of course it was 80 foot up in the air and it was traveling, so it probably shot beyond that point a little bit, and it should be somewhere on this hill. I spent about 2 hours right after the drone crashed looking for it up here. And if it crashed somewhere in this grass, it should have been pretty visible. The grass was pretty short. But there's a lot of sage brush up here, and there's a fairly good chance it might have dived into one of those. If that's the case, it'd be pretty hard to find. Those bushes are pretty thick. I looked in every single bush. And what you see me doing right here is I'm flying a grid pattern. Again, this is the following morning, back and forth to search that whole area. And I went back and I downloaded this video onto my computer to see if I could possibly spot it from the air. But after looking and looking, I just couldn't find it anywhere. My wife looked also. I thought it might have overshot and been right down here in the bottom side of the hill, but I don't think it would have traveled that far since it was mostly heading right down. So it's up there somewhere, but I never found it. And fortunately, I was still able to fly the Avata using the old Goggles V2. Those goggles are really old. Got about 1,000 flights on them. They're at least 4 years old. But unfortunately, my V2 goggles failed in flight flying the Avata 3 days later. This is Sucker Creek where the goggles failed in flight flying the Avata. The goggles failed about 4 minutes into this flight and the screen just went blank. Fortunately, it was only about 300 feet away. I was able to see the drone and I was able to land it visually. And the goggles just went black at the end of this clip right here. Here's the old V2 goggles that failed in flight. Pretty shot. Straps are all tattered. Faceplate is kind of coming undone here. It's just really, really in bad shape. Be good to replace these. So I replaced the drone and the goggles with the DJI FPV Explorer Combo. Pretty nice. I really like these goggles. They're just fantastic. And here's the new drone with the goggles, and really nice, these Integra goggles. They're 1080p, a lot better resolution than the old V2 goggles. Another nice feature of these goggles is that all the flight data is recorded onto the screen. And of course these goggles work with both the DJI Avata as well as the FPV drone, and of course the motion controller. I've also got this old DJI FPV drone. It was working fine, but for some reason I cannot get it to bind to these goggles right here, and the new one binds just fine. And I updated the firmware, tried to with the DJI Fly app on the phone as well as the DJI Assistant. Wouldn't do it at all on the phone. With the Assistant, half of it uploaded, but the transmission part would not. And if anybody has any ideas on that, let me know, because I'd prefer to fly the old drone in case I lose another one and keep this brand new one for my backup. Here's a little sample of the new Integra goggles. They're really nice, 1080p. This is an Avata flight in manual mode. Fairly good speed here in manual mode, a little over 50 miles an hour. Here it's showing the elevation above the ground. That's one of the features I really like about both these goggles and the old V2. I find that really helpful to review that after the flight. It's a little risky to spend too much time looking at that during the flight. And here's a little sample of the new FPV drone with the Integra goggles in flight. The greater speed of the FPV drone is pretty apparent right in here. The high speed and the stability of this drone is really what makes it so much fun to fly. "92 miles an hour right here. Back in the saddle again.